Welcome to the Future of Structures podcast, where we talk to the experts who are evolving our buildings of tomorrow. And here is your host, Adam Jones.
Hey guys, today we interview Shane Scranton. Now, boy, was I excited for this interview. So Shane was the co-founder and CEO of Iris VR. He's been featured in Bloomberg, Forbes, 30 Under 30. So he was trained as an architect and started his career in 3D rendering, tech as a visual artist. But since the release of Oculus Rift, he went hard at virtual reality, and that's how he created and has been working on Iris. So Iris VR is something that I have seen in the company I work at, and if you haven't tried virtual reality in the past, go out there and use it. It will blow your absolute mind. This is going to have an absolutely huge impact on the buildings industry, and Shane Scranton, he is at the absolute front of this change or revolution in the buildings industry. So we cover a lot of exciting things in this interview. So where is the technology at right now for virtual reality? Where is the technology at for augmented reality? And where is it going to be in 1 year's time, 3 years, and 5 years' time? Because in 5 years' time, it might be absolutely scary where it's going to be. And Shane, you know, there's no one who's got a better idea of where the technology is going to be than Shane Scranton. So guys, I hope you enjoy this interview as much as I did, because it is absolutely phenomenal. Shane Scranton is an absolute genius, and he really is shaping the future of our whole building industry.
So my name is Shane Scranton. I'm one of the co-founders of Iris VR. I started this because previously I was studying architecture, and I worked in architecture in the US. After school, I was an intern at a few different firms, and I was the 3D guy. I was the BIM guy. Yeah. I did a lot of the renderings. I was sort of the go-to 3D person at these firms, and I loved it. I really loved the profession, but I was drawn more to the technology side. So I actually branched out of architecture and into doing more freelance 3D rendering work. And that company is what then turned into Iris. I was doing a lot of renderings and visualization, and then VR came out, and that was clearly the medium of choice. So I started working on that software instead.
Yeah, cool. So did you need like some kind of coding or developing experience as well to develop something like Iris?
Yes, I needed that, or a co-founder who knew how to program. And I happened to partner with a programmer who's named Nate Beatty, and we started the company together. He worked with me as a programmer in my freelance company as well. So we had a working history together. And I don't really have the coding chops. I can sort of find my way around code, but I do have the 3D chops. So I know a lot of the modeling and rendering technologies, and we can sort of even each other out then, because he can do a lot of the programming implementation and I can do the 3D work.
Yeah. So was this your first jump into business in a big way, or did you launch a few businesses as well when you were through university and things like that?
This was the first one, I would say, in a formal sense. The freelance company was really my own and was making money and was a growing business, so I got to see it from a sort of creative angle. I had no experience in software, and I think one thing that I love about our day to day here is that it really started as a project. Like we didn't set out to build a company. We started as like, hey, it would be great to get 3D files into VR. Let's try to do that. And then as it started picking up steam, we incorporated, and then very quickly we realized that we had like a 5-year roadmap. And that ballooned into something much larger, and it's been quite the ride since then.
Yeah, unreal. So when was the first time you came across actual virtual reality, or were you actually the first use of it was your own? I guess when you first built it, or was it through another software, or when was When was your first experience?
So the first experience I had was the Oculus Rift in the early days was. It wasn't owned by Facebook at that time. It was independent. It was started by a guy named Palmer Luckey, and he had a Kickstarter that was, I think at the time, it broke a lot of Kickstarter's records.
Oh, nice.
They were asking for like $100,000 and raised over $1 million, and that made a big splash. So that was called the Developer Kit 1. So right after that Kickstarter campaign, it caught my attention. So I ordered one of those development kits, and this was in late 2013. So I got my hands on that development kit, and I just started prototyping in it, and then that was my first experience in it. And for anyone who's tried VR, who's listening, they'll be able to share in the experience of the first time you put on the goggles. Like even in those early days, there was such an incredible sense of scale and of space, sort of spatial presence. And so really, like the first experience I made was just a custom house model in VR, and I put it on and was like, oh my God, this is, I feel like I'm standing in something spatial, and that's something that's so lacking in the design and construction space.
Yeah.
So pretty much right after that first experience, I was sold on its power and AEC. And then at that point, it was like, let's go out and evangelize it, just show everyone this demo I made. So the first like 6 months of the company, we were just giving demos. We were showing everyone that one experience, even before we had software built.
That's right. It's like you always remember your first, I think, especially with VR.
Yeah, well, and hopefully your first experience is comfortable. This is one of the biggest challenges of the VR still is like VR does not, the hardware itself doesn't make people sick. It's the experiences. If they're not at a good frame rate or if their movement's weird, it can make you really sick. Yeah. So this is an ongoing challenge we have of a lot of people try VR and their first experience makes them kind of queasy, and it's really hard to shake that. So a lot of our time is spent educating people on best practices in VR so they don't get sick. Because if you have a good experience, you're sold. I mean, it's such a powerful technology that if you out of the gate have a powerful, sort of comfortable experience, you're a believer.
Yeah, totally. Let's backtrack a little bit to what drawings used to be. So when you first, I guess, 20 or 30 years ago, it was hand drawings, and then it progressed to BIM. So obviously, this is a logical progression over that. Is that? Do you think, or can we talk a little bit about the history of drawings maybe and building information?
Absolutely. So I do. I think that VR, I'll tell you more of my biases on VR in a bit, but I do see it as a natural progression in this industry, especially, I don't think VR would really be where it is today, at least in our industry, if BIM hadn't progressed to where it is. I mean, we were 20 or 30 years ago in 2D land and just coordinating everything via drawing, and then of course moved into CAD and 3D, and now we're at sort of data-rich 3D with BIM. So there is this very nice progression towards more data, more spatial data, more ability to coordinate digitally, and we've approached this point where finally, like Revit and ArchiCAD and other BIM solutions are really taking off, and it makes sense to even implement BIM at smaller project levels, and that has only really been in the last, at least in the US, it's only been in the last like 5 years. And what's amazing about that trend is now there's 3D content everywhere. BIM is inherently 3D, so now most firms have a lot of 3D content, which is really the gateway into VR. VR doesn't work if you don't have 3D content. So I see BIM as being an incredibly important foundation for VR. And I think if VR had happened like 15 years ago, like it actually had in the 90s, the industry really wouldn't have been ready for it to happen. So this is a really good time for VR because we have the data and we have a good way to consume it, and VR really enables people to better see this 3D experience in a true to scale way.
Yeah, unreal. So where is the technology at like right now? Like what are some of the cool things you can do with it? If someone's never tried it, what can they actually do with VR at the moment?
So right now VR is still first generation. So the headsets are in their first release cycle. They have essentially most of the really immersive headsets have a couple components. They have the goggles that you strap on your face, and then they also have motion controllers that allow you to see your hands in the virtual environment. And those three things combined, you usually have some sensors as well. So the whole package, you're able to put on the goggles, pick up the controllers, and start walking around your physical space, and you really feel like you're walking around a virtual environment. The reason they really are noticeably first generation is they're pretty big. You look kind of goofy with them on. There are these cables everywhere. Nothing's wireless yet. It requires a pretty big laptop to run. So all the hardware is like pretty early stage. But what's nice about it is once you put it on, you really lose sense of the fact that you're strapped in. You really do feel like you're in a different world. And the other reason that it exists so widely today is they're at a reasonable price point for first generation technology. VR in the 90s was $100,000, and today you can get an Oculus Rift and the touch controllers for like $500. And so it's just at a price point that's much more attainable for day-to-day firms.
Yeah, and the business case is there. Like as a structural engineer, when I first started my career, it would be in 2Ds you see clash detection with some of the mech drawings. It's kind of difficult, but now what we do is we just import the mech model, and you got the structures model. You put the VR on and use the software you've created, and then you go in and straight away you can see all the clashes, and then in 2 minutes you can probably do what used to take about half an hour at least, or an hour.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because there are so many use cases for VR that we hadn't anticipated. Because I'm an architect by training, I came in and was like, this is going to be great for design. And I was sort of squarely in the design head. The second we rolled out some of our software and people were getting their Revit files into VR and their Sketch files, I don't know why I didn't anticipate it, but of course the client interface is massive. Being able to get sort of the owner at any stage in the project in to approve different elements, or to, even if there's like an RFI on site, like being able to strap on the goggles and be like, where's the issue? I mean, there's a tremendous amount of value outside of the design world. And I think what you're describing, we sort of see as like 3D model QA QC of like, you can go into your digital model now and just do essentially a visual look around and get a sense of like, oh, our chairs are floating 3 feet off the floor, or like, oh, the exit signs are embedded in the walls wrong. Like you can catch things in VR that you wouldn't normally catch in like a preview window in Revit.
Yeah.
And that's been cool to see. Like it extends way beyond the design cycle of architects and into a lot of the construction coordination and engineering worlds too.
Yeah, and just for the clients, anyone listening, as soon as you bring a client into the VR and it's their first experience, immediately they're wowed, and then you're in the good book. So you build up those brownie points straight away if you give them the VR experience, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's also, I don't know anyone on a building project who if you can't read plans very well, you're not going to say that on a job site, right? Like there's a lot of people that I think have a hard time looking at a plan and understanding the spatial ramifications. And I think what VR is so good at is allowing someone who might struggle reading things spatially to actually go in and be able to participate in the conversation and in a more meaningful way than they could have before. And I think that's huge for owners. If they're doing a complex project and they're trying to make decisions, VR is a great way to deliver that information.
Yeah, totally. And you mentioned design before, so I haven't actually designed in VR yet. So can you tell us a little bit about what design could look like in VR?
Yeah, we built a lot of our software to really facilitate iteration. So if you have Revit or SketchUp or Rhino open and you're making adjustments to your model and you're testing out different design options, being able to, in about 30 seconds, go into VR and look at those options, either by toggling your layers on and off so you can see different geometry sets, or by going in, looking around, like testing out, let's say, the height of some windows, saying, oh, I want to bring those down 4 feet, and actually leaving VR, going back, adjusting that in your real 3D model, and then loading it back up in like 30 seconds. So we see this iteration workflow forming where if we can make the VR bridge fast enough, people will start using it really just to test out different ideas they have and use it in a way to prototype. And we're seeing that now. Like we're at a point where the technology is fast enough that you don't really have to wait around to get it into VR, and that allows people to play around with different ideas pretty quickly.
So they can go in there, and can they change things like colors or just different types of materials and different products and those kinds of things as well for architects?
Mm-hmm. So our architects can essentially set up their 3D model to have different options, right? So they can put them on different layers, put them on different viewpoints, and then when they're in VR, they can switch between those. Additionally, they can do like sun studies. So they can the models are accurately located in space. So in VR, we have a little slider. You can change the time of day, you can change the time of year, and that will show you accurately where the sun's hitting in the model. So with those two things combined, you get a lot of the functionality of like looking at design options. What you bring up in terms of like switching materials on the fly and switching elements on the fly, that's a lot of the things that are on our roadmap right now, actually, that we want to increase the interactivity within VR instead of needing to go back to your source file, being able to actually interact with individual elements in VR and really manipulate them in certain ways. So that's coming pretty soon. Right now, though, you can do it through design options.
Yeah, I'm super excited to hear about the roadmap as well. But I guess one of the negative things of having VR is probably people are going to just have more sick days, or just, I don't know, it's just too much fun in there at the moment. And that sun setting you mentioned, it's like in Melbourne right now, it's just cold and kind of dark. I've just kept going in the VR room, finding the best architect's model we got in the office and just going in there and turning the sun on, and it's a whole different world, and spending about an hour and a half in there just hanging out. It's great.
It's that's hilarious. Yeah, make it beautiful and get a nice beach scene and call it a day.
Yeah.
But you bring up a funny point, actually, that we were really concerned about in the early days of like, will VR be perceived as a gimmick? I think that it has quite a lot of gimmicky potential, and we really wanted to, right when we were starting the company, it was like, well, is this also going to be seen as a utility and as a tool? And I think thankfully the answer is absolutely yes, it's going to be seen as a tool. I think it is sort of it's the responsibility of professionals in the space to present it as such. I think that we have challenges where we'll be like at a trade show and there's a VR room, but they're just like, it's a construction trade show and they're showing video games or something, they're not showing utilities. And I think VR is a medium. It will be used to display everything from video games to movies to CAD models to, pick a category. It's going to be used in that way. So it's sort of on the industry, and it's our responsibility to showcase it as a tool, because it is a tool in certain use cases. It is also a fantastic gaming platform. Well, very fun.
Another really exciting use, I'm not sure if this is on your roadmap or it's here right now, but that's having multiple users in the same model. Is that here yet?
That is not built into the production software yet. Internally, we have that build now. We're bringing people into our office in New York quite a bit and having them walk through multi-user together. We're still working out a lot of the interface challenges, but the core tech is there, and we have like avatars so you can see the other person in the space, and then you also have voice chat so you can hear the other person talking. And we're building the web technology so that it works across geographic regions. So if you have an office in Melbourne and you have an office in New York, you could come into the same digital model together and essentially do a site walkthrough, and you use it as a walkthrough digitally.
Wow, that's incredible. Just, I guess in the future there may be like no traditional kind of meetings. You just go to the model. If your meeting's about, say, a certain flaw or a certain technical issue, you just go straight to the technical issue in the model, as opposed to everyone driving 1 hour to get to the meeting and then talk about shit for an hour and then.
Oh, that's the hope. I hope we get there with certain customers this year. We're really close on the tech side, and I've worked on projects where there's a 3-hour drive to a job site to look over some basic coordination issues, and let's start doing that in VR. Let's say you get the computer for $2,000, you get the headset for $500. That will pay itself off very quickly if you save a couple trips back and forth to the job site. So it feels futuristic, but it's really coming very soon, and I find that very exciting.
Yeah. So we've touched on a bit about your roadmap. Can you perhaps fill us in a little bit more about what's to come with Iris?
Mm-hmm. We're at a really high level. We're building this out in a way where we do see a future where there is some sort of immersive device at everyone's desk. Right now there's 1 or 2 headsets in an office, and that makes sense. They're early technology, and people are setting them up in these central locations. Over time, we see Apple, Google, Microsoft, they're all working on personal immersive devices. And a lot of our thinking long term is we really see VR and AR as companion products at the workstation and as people do their day-to-day work. And so things like multi-user, things like working on a punch list tool or a call-out tool or an annotation tool, all of that is to facilitate day-to-day coordination, day-to-day meetings, day-to-day communication, and getting it to a point where it's so easy to use that when the headsets are really accessible, people can really easily, anyone at a firm can really easily engage in this immersive environment. So that's the high level vision, and you can probably tell I rolled in AR into that because I do think that VR as a standalone product is going to be pretty short lived. I think that AR and VR will be one device, and that a lot of those devices are coming pretty soon. So I see VR as a great first step, but AR and VR combined are going to be a lot of the future technologies.
Wow. So can we just take a step back and just distinguish between AR and VR for any listeners who aren't aware?
Absolutely. So VR is fully virtual. You don't see any of your real life surroundings. You put on the goggles and there's no pass through. You're getting just a screen. And AR, you can see through the glasses, so you see the world around you, and it just adds 3D digital elements to that world. And what's so powerful about, VR is amazing for fully immersing you in a space. AR is amazing if you're, say, on a job site and you want to see the next phase of your project. You could get an overlay on your job site and see what's coming next on your project, for example. And AR is going to have amazing capabilities for essentially seeing in context digital design elements and coordination elements. And AR is mainly available on the Microsoft HoloLens right now. It's pretty good. It's a very early proof of concept, but it sort of reminds me of where VR was 3 years ago. So we're sort of guessing that in 2 or 3 years, both AR and VR will be pretty mature technologies, be widely accessible.
So you mentioned in AR, so you'd be on your job site and you look at the next phase. Is that a tiny model on your desk, or are you talking about you going on the actual site and you put the HoloLens on and you see it in the real scale? Or can you just break that down a little bit?
Yeah, so I think it's both. I think AR, one use case is seeing a scale model in front of you on a real life desk. I think that's okay. I think that's a little gimmicky. I think you can do the same thing in VR. I think where it really sings is if you're building something, you go onto the job site with your glasses, and you can see the BIM model overlaid on your job site. So if you're up on a catwalk somewhere and looking at putting in panels, and you need to decide on what panels you're going to order, why not load up a couple options and look at them in context on your job site? Or you're doing window schedules and you want to choose, which manufacturer to order from, and you have a couple different ones lined up in your BIM model. I think there's going to be a really powerful component to standing in context and seeing your data overlaid there.
Yeah, wow. Unreal. So we just covered, I guess, the VR, the overview of your roadmap. Can we just get into maybe now the more specific things in the roadmap that is maybe to come?
Yeah, absolutely. So this year for us, a big theme was collaboration, and is collaboration. That's one of the reasons we've been working so hard on multi-user in-house, and it's one of the reasons we've been doing these pilots in our office, and we plan on getting that out very soon. The next sort of phase for us after collaboration is interactivity. We really, in the early days of our company, we were just working on the engine to get these files into VR. There was a lot of work there to just get a big 3D model of a building into VR quickly. That took a lot of time and engineering.
Yeah.
that sort of checked off. We're getting really close to that being pretty feature complete. So once collaboration is in the works, really the next step is when you're in VR and you're with other people, what elements do you want to interact with? What elements do you want to mark up? What elements do you want to take notes on? And really, what tools best facilitate an in VR meeting? Yeah. And for example, we're looking at ways to do more advanced callouts. So right now our callout tool is just a red circle that stamps onto elements. Instead, it's I think a more helpful callout would be I can tag an object and leave a speech command on it, and I can actually narrate and get text that shows up. Or say I want to take a couple measurements, I want those to persist in my VR world, and then get those output to me after the VR experience.
Wow. So I guess if you're going back to the clash detection what I brought up earlier, you can just go straight in, do the call out tool, do the voice command, and then there's another tool you got on Iris is that the photo, so you can take snapshots and then perhaps do the whole walkthrough and then do it a breeze, and then that would be incredible. I can see the potential also.
Absolutely. So the workflow of like taking the screenshot and outputting that, but I think even the next step from that is you find your clashes, you flag them, and then when you take off the goggles, they're already highlighted in Revit or they're already highlighted in SketchUp. Like I think there's a way to just bridge the gap between VR and your BIM model in a more sort of cohesive way. So I'm giving you kind of vague answers because, as you can tell, we sort of have the high level buckets. A lot of the implementation details of this we're still working on with users. Like there's VR is such uncharted territory that a lot of our product decisions and a lot of our design decisions are made alongside our customers' requests. Like we sort of know the buckets, but in terms of the implementation details, like that comes from watching how our customers interface with clients. It comes from listening to how they want to actually use this in day-to-day workflows. Yeah. Because there is so much we could do, a lot of it is boiling down to sort of what are the highest priorities of architects and engineers in the space.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, and do you think this is going a little bit left of center, but say you mentioned design for architects, do you think down the track it might be something where you can do design for engineers as well, whereas say as a structural engineer you might walk through the model, you click on it and then the loads, and then you do the actual design in the virtual reality. Do you think things like that might be possible in the future?
I do. I think we've focused first on supporting existing content just because there's so much work being done in Revit and these other tools. But I think as the industry matures a little bit and the controller interface is a little easier and you have a little more fine-tuned control with your hands, some sort of creation modeling tool would be really compelling. And I really hope Iris is in that ecosystem pretty soon, actually. So I think that there's tremendous potential there for being able to actually create your own geometry in VR.
Yeah, wow. And so if there's anyone, I guess, who's probably a little bit younger and listening to this and they just want to get on this technology in every way, and there's, as you said, there's so many directions it can go, and if someone wants to jump on board, is it possible for someone to get in there and perhaps like write their own add-in, or how would they get on board this on virtual reality?
So now is actually a pretty good time out of any time because Oculus Rift goggles are on sale. They were about $600 or $700, and now they're down to $400 or $500. So the goggles themselves are more accessible. The price will continue to drop, but it's the lowest it's been so far. Yeah. And then the computer hardware has also gotten a lot cheaper. So I'm actually looking at a computer right now that we just bought that was about $2,000. That's about the size of a MacBook Pro, and it's VR ready. So even for a small firm, it is no longer a huge investment. It's a medium level investment to get VR going. And then from Iris' side, from the software side, we do have a free trial, and it's actually probably by the time you air this, it'll be 45-day trial. We're actually in a couple days rolling out a 45-day trial. So you'll be able to try out the software for free for that time. And then after the trial, there is a sort of basic tier that will still let you use it for free, and then there's a pro tier that you can buy. But we're trying to make it as accessible as possible for people to actually go in and immediately use their existing files in VR. Yeah. And I will challenge one thing you said, where it was sort of, you said that younger people in the listening audience engaging with VR and who are interested. It's getting to a point where even if you're not tech savvy, it's becoming accessible, and we're really excited about that because it really was a specialized technology for such a long time. And at this point, we have seen partners starting to engage with the software. We've seen more senior staff engaging with this technology because it is plug and play ever more. And we're getting close to a point where it's very easy to set up. So I would encourage everyone to try to engage with it.
Oh, yeah, 100%. So what about, I guess, for people at university and they want to get into the virtual reality industry as a architect or as an engineer, not just your classical engineer, is it possible to go in there and actually write their own software or add-ins or things like that, or what's the best way of getting in? Should they just apply for your company straight away maybe?
Yeah, I think a great place to start, and I wish I had this skill set myself, is architects and engineers and anyone who's working with 3D models is already like a lot of the way there because they know how to create 3D geometry, and it's a very good skill set to have in VR. The other component is really the game engine component. VR works by leveraging game engines.
Yeah.
So you can actually, if you're interested, you can download Unity, which is a free game engine, and it will allow you to sort of play around in the programming side and actually create custom VR experiences. What I wish I had known back when I was in school is a programming language called C#.
Yep.
If you know a little bit of C#, you can do quite a lot of custom work in Unity, and that's a pretty great skill set to have going into the future. Is if you're architecture or engineering, you have the 3D skill set. If you get a little bit of programming chops on top of that, you could be really sort of valuable on the Unity side and building custom VR experiences. So if I were in school right now, that's what I'd be doing.
Unreal. So I guess we've covered now the shorter term vision, like 2 to 3 years. Let's get a little bit out there, and there's other exponential technologies out there like AI. Is there any places that VR and AI and other technologies will intersect just to create some ridiculous new, I don't know, something that's just completely, that could blow our mind?
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, I think if we start looking 10 years out or farther, it gets hard to predict when this stuff starts happening. But automation is in the news right now a lot, and machine learning and AI, and I'm increasingly impressed by how much companies like Google and Apple can figure out about my photos and can figure out about my my life just through sort of massive data sets. And I think that the construction industry over time will start embracing that, where if we have all of this geometry with rich metadata associated with it being read into these real-time engines, there is a point where I think AI and machine learning can start being predictive about the building you're working on. I mean, something as simple as like if you load up geometry that looks like a door, it knows that the door should swing open. Like stuff like that is incredibly complex, but I think the intelligence will be there just based on the data sets that are starting to be uploaded to the cloud. So I think there's a really interesting future with, when you mentioned like creation tools or modeling in VR, I think a big part of it will be based on sort of computer intelligence, of being able to go in and be like, I want to build this structural model, and having essentially the AI assist you in building that in your immersive world. So I think that's coming in the future at some point, and hopefully at that point we'll have contact lenses or sunglasses or something, so we won't even need to worry about putting on these goggles. They'll just sort of already be on.
Oh wow, that's crazy to think about. Is there? And how realistic will it be?
That, but sure.
And when you're in the model, will it get to the point where it almost looks like, you know, I guess the real world, do you think? Or
So this is actually a really interesting topic. I don't think it needs to. There's a lot of research being done in VR right now, just like people, as humans, we are very willing to make the mental leap into believing that we're somewhere else, and VR can very much convince you that you're somewhere else. There's a lot of theories that you don't actually need to get to true photorealism for people to really lose themselves in the medium. And I think graphic quality will get a lot better. I don't think it's going to have to look like exactly real life to be very convincing. Yeah. And so I actually think you're gonna be able to lose yourself in this medium well before it's photoreal.
Yeah, 100%. So this is a question I've asked the guests so far, but I guess the whole podcast has been about this question. But what do you think will be the most influential impact on the buildings industry going forward? And I'll let you answer that. But we've covered it, I guess, in this whole podcast. But is there anything else you can add to that?
I think a few people on our team have been saying this, and I love it. It's I think meetings are going to get better. I think that people are going to be having better meetings in this industry, and like, God, that's important. This industry, like this whole construction coordination and design process, is very difficult. Yeah. And I love the idea of VR facilitating better meetings and making sure people are more on the same page and moving more efficiently. So I think we're going to see that in short order, and I'm very excited for that.
Unreal. And say if someone is just graduating now and someone's a bit younger who's listening, do you have any advice you'd give to someone or to your younger self, if you were just leaving university, what things would you say to that person?
I would say apply to work at Iris. We are looking for employees. And jokes aside, I am serious. We are hiring. But I think that I have found there is a tremendous opportunity right now to be entrepreneurial. The world is very connected. I mean, we're calling across continents. It's unbelievably easy to start your own thing. There's a lot of systems in place now and venture capital and a lot of infrastructure built for companies to start. And so I think that if you have a passion project that is getting a lot of warm reception, it is absolutely worth taking that seriously, because now is a very good time in history to start your own venture.
Wow.
And people, if you're right out of school, that is a very good age to start a company, because you're resilient and you can work off 0 hours of sleep and you're firing on cylinders, and it's a really good time to really go deep into something. So I encourage people to work on those passion projects full time.
Yeah, it's a great way to end. I guess there's no other. It's in all the history, there's never been a time like it is now. It's unbelievable with all the change and uncertainty going forward. I guess there's other problems with climate change, but then you got technology and you got the world economy. It's really an incredible time to be around.
It is, and we need a lot more new ideas. Now is a very good time to be generating new concepts and really pushing things forward that people are passionate about.
Hey guys, just before you go, one quick request. If you're listening on iTunes, please leave a review. It helps our ranking on iTunes so more people can find us and more people can listen to the experts who are changing our buildings for the better in the future for a sustainable planet. And if you don't want to leave a review, just hit subscribe so all our episodes just appear magically in your iPhone every single week and you won't miss a thing.